I'm Michelle Boston.
And I'm Tequina Boston. Invite historical drama fans you know to subscribe to Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters wherever they enjoy their favorite podcast. Subscribers receive notifications about new episodes and bonus content.
Sign up for our newsletter on our webpage at michonbostongroup.com/Boston Sisters or on our Instagram bio link at Historical Drama Sisters and receive news and announcements about upcoming podcasts and historical drama activities. Enjoy the podcast and thank you for listening. Welcome to Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters, where we talk about historical drama series and films as windows to the past and mirrors of the present. I'm Michonne Boston.
And I'm Tequina Boston. This season, we kick off our annual Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters From Page to Screen podcast with Carole Boston Weatherford, author of one of our From Page to Screen book selections. Carole Boston Weatherford has written 90 books for children and youth about Americans who broke barriers and advanced freedom movements in United States history. Many of Carole's books about American history feature stories and themes discussed in our Revolution to Rights America at 250 series.
Though we generally recommend books that are adaptations or provide backstory to the historical dramas we talk about, we could also call our podcast bookshelf From Screen to Page, because often our reading is inspired by the films and series we watch. This year, our book recommendations fall into two categories. Books related to Revolution to Rights America at 250. These are books rooted in actual history. Our second list of books is inspired by literary adaptations and biography, as well as fiction that corresponds to the historical periods depicted in novels by 19th century authors Alexander Dumas and Jane Austen. At the end of this podcast, we give you our 2026 From Page to Screen book picks and how you can learn more about our book selections in a special bonus podcast.
We begin our conversation about writing history for children and youth with Carole Boston Weatherford. Carole Boston Weatherford's books have garnered 2 NAACP Image Awards and 18 American Library Association Youth Media Awards, including a Newbery Honor, Coretta Scott King Award, and 4 Caldecott Honors. Her career achievements have been recognized with the North Carolina Award for Literature, the Nonfiction Award from the Children's Book Guild, and induction into the North Carolina Literary Hall of Fame. A retired English professor, she lives in Baltimore, Maryland, and collaborates with her son, Jeffrey Boston Weatherford, an accomplished artist and award-winning illustrator.
Welcome, Carole, to Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I guess we can make you a Boston sister, too.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So we got the trio, the Boston Sisters.
Yeah, how about that?
So tell us about your writer's journey and why you chose to write history for young readers. That's so important.
Well, I actually started writing when I was in first grade, and I dictated a poem to my mother on the way home from school. Actually, I recited it for her. Then she asked me to say it the second time. And when I said it the second time, I didn't realize it, but I was dictating it to her. And it was a poem about the 4 seasons. I continued writing poems in the early grades. And when my parents decided that it wasn't a fluke, my mom asked my dad if he would use some of my poems as typesetting exercises for his students in his printing class at Frederick Douglass High School. So I got to see my work in print in the 1960s. Before the dawn of all the digital technology that we all take for granted nowadays. So it was really a thrill. I did not dream of becoming an author then because I had not met any real live authors. And I just assumed that the authors of the books that I so loved to read were, 1, white men, 2, were not getting paid to do that work, and 3, were probably all dead anyway. So I did not aspire to become an author until I had a poem published in Metropolitan Magazine, which is a now defunct city magazine out of Baltimore. And the poem was called I'm Made of Jazz, and that came out in 1980. I was 24 years old, and seeing my work in print, professionally published, just went to my head, and I decided I wanted to become an author. I was writing for adults at that time, but when I had kids in the late 80s, I was exposed to a new generation of children's books that were much more diverse than any that I had access to. And the light bulb went off in my head that maybe I could write for children. And I shifted my focus, and lo and behold, my first book came out in 1995. I've been in the industry now 31 years and have about 90 books.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So I believe that children are a very important audience, perhaps the most important audience, because they hold the key to our future. And so we've got to pour everything we can into them, and writing is my way of doing that.
Tell us about your process, especially the research part, because these are history books, and I know you have to go into maybe original documents, maybe other things. Tell us about that process.
Right. When I can, I do use primary source materials, and the research process is a lot different now than it was when I started out. Back in the early 80s, I thought I was doing picture research for an adult book of poetry. It eventually, 20 years later, turned out to be a children's book of poetry. But I had to actually go to the Library of Congress, Prints and Photographs Division, put on white gloves, use a little stubby pencil, and go back and forth to the reference librarian and say, will you bring out this photo? Will you bring out that photo? Of course, now much of library and archival collections are digitized, making it easier for researchers. We don't necessarily have to travel. It's always good when you can go on location, but you don't necessarily have to. So one of the first places I'd look when I am researching a book is public libraries and public archives to see what they have in terms of primary source materials, newspaper articles, oral histories, photographs. Even though I'm a writer, images are very important to me because I have to be able to recreate the past. And to do that, I have to know what the past looked like.
Mm.
So picture research is a very important part of my process, as are speeches, any first person materials that I can find about the subject. I also go to museums and historical sites, and sometimes those visits actually inspire my works, not necessarily right away, but maybe years later, the subject matter will bubble up to the top, and I say, "Oh, I should write about the bombing of 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, or I should write about the Greensboro sit-ins." It doesn't always, happen like overnight, like boom, I need to write about that. But occasionally it does, and one example is when Ketanji Brown Jackson was nominated as Supreme Court Justice. I knew the moment that I saw her standing with uh, Vice President Kamala Harris and President Joe Biden that I needed to write that book. As a Black woman, I was just so moved by the symbolism of that I knew I wanted to write her biography, and and of course I did.
Wow. Well, Carole, you said you've written 90 books, and I'll say 90 books and counting.
Yes.
And you talk a little bit about sometimes a place will inspire a book, not right away, but something will bubble up and you say, hey, maybe I do want to write about that. What other criteria do you use to select the historical events and people that you write about?
Yes, I write a lot of biographies, and most of them are poetic biographies or verse novels. And what I have to bring to those projects is a sense of awe and a sense of wonder myself, because I want to be able to convey that to young readers. So I'm not going to write about someone that I'm not in awe of. So, obviously I was in awe of Ketanji Brown Jackson. I was
Yeah.
in awe of Bayard Rustin, a gay Black man who could not be himself. He was not allowed to love who he wanted to love at the time that he was organizing the March on Washington, or when he was assisting Dr. King, mentoring Dr. King during the Montgomery bus boycott. But nevertheless, he made an important contribution behind the scenes. So often, people that I write about are unsung heroes, and more importantly, sheroes, because many of the women freedom fighters have not gotten the credit that they're due. I mean, Harriet Tubman, of course, she's gotten her props, many times, and I did write about Harriet Tubman early in my career, but I've also written about people like Fannie Lou Hamer, who I thought might be a household name, but is not. For
Yeah,
whatever
yeah.
reason, she's not, because she's a woman. The only woman of the civil rights movement who gets any play is Rosa Parks. And out of the slavery era, Harriet Tubman, occasionally there may be a mention of Sojourner Truth, but that's pretty much it. But there were many other women who propelled the freedom movement. And I think it's important that young people know them because otherwise young people grow up thinking, okay, you're waiting for that, that singular leader. No, you can be a
Mhm.
leader. You can be a change maker yourself, regardless of your age, regardless of the color of your skin, regardless of your economic status. You can be a change maker.
Yeah, Michonne and I, one of the reasons we do the podcast is we like to find either the unknown stories or the background that isn't talked about as much. And so we really appreciate your bringing to your writing those people who aren't as well known or aren't as much written about or appear in the stories. But let's talk about a personal story that you and your son engaged in together in creating Kin Rooted in Hope, which is your multi-generational family story, but written in the context of the history of other families that interacted with your family through generations, through the institutions of enslavement, through the movement towards freedom, because, we talk about the freedom movement as beginning from the time that people of African descent landed on these shores to today. But I'm really interested in knowing more about what led you and your son, Jeffrey Boston Weatherford, who's an illustrator, what led you to do your own family history story? And what was the process of finding those stories and putting them together and creating the visual history as well as the poetic storytelling that you do in that book?
That book is really a journey for us as well. And of course, it's a historic chronicle of our family's history dating back to 1770 at White House Plantation on Maryland's Eastern Shore, which also happens to be the plantation where Frederick Douglass was first enslaved. Jeffrey and I had both been visiting Easton, Maryland, Talbot County, Maryland, all our lives, and as children, we visited there. Of course, we weren't children at the same time, but I visited when I was a child. He visited when he was a child, spent some time there during the summer, with his grandparents, my parents. So we were absorbing some of that history as children. We didn't necessarily know the significance of it per se as children, but we were nevertheless, absorbing it. And as we visited, more and more of that history we noticed was being documented or at least recognized by the county and by the state. For example, a state historical marker went up in Unionville, a village that was co-founded by my great great grandfather, his third great grandfather, who had fought in the U.S. colored troops. Isaac Copper co-founded that village with other veterans of the U.S. colored troops. There were 18 of them. And Isaac Copper, our great grandfather, was one of them. So that was a village that was co-founded. We also knew that Copperville, where we have a family home, had been co-founded by my other great great grandfather, James Money. So, we grew up knowing those things and seeing photographs, old photographs of at least of Philip Money, who was also enslaved at White House, as was Isaac Copper. And so, we just grew up with that history. But it was not until our agent was looking for a project that we could work on together. Our agent, Reuben Pfeffer, said, is there a town like like Edgar Lee Masters used in Spoon River Anthology that you and Jeffrey could write about? And I said, well, there's Unionville and Copperville, and our families co-founded those villages. And so the process didn't begin right away at that time, but the seed was planted. And then there was an exhibition of artwork by Ruth Starr Rose, who was an artist who lived in Copperville with her family. She was a wealthy white woman, Vassar-trained artist, and instead of painting socialites like most artists of her time would have done, she decided to paint people in her community, and that meant she was painting members of our family. And there was a retrospective of her work probably in, let's see, maybe in 2017, maybe 2016 at the Lewis Museum, the Reginald F. Lewis Museum of African and African American History and Culture in Maryland. When I went to that exhibition, I knew I was going to see artwork, but I had no idea that I was going to be seeing members of my family in paintings. And I even saw a portrait of my dad when he was about age
Wow.
7, and
Mm.
no one had ever told me about this woman who had not only painted the community, but had painted a mural in the Black church in that community, the church my family attended. So that really helped me to see my family in a different light, to see them as founders among Maryland's founding families. So that exhibition allowed me to see them in their rightful place in Maryland's history. And I got busy after I saw the exhibition, which also included a photograph of Isaac Copper, who fought in the U.S. colored troops. Uh, After I saw that photograph, which I'd never seen the man's face before, I got busy doing the research. That was the catalyst. Of course, I did a lot of historical research. Some of it I did at the Maryland History Center in Baltimore, at the Talbot County Free Library, the Maryland Room, and I was able to do a lot of research online and used a lot of primary sources like the database Slave Ship Voyages. There's a database of residents of White House that was compiled by the University of Maryland. There's been an archaeological dig at the former plantation, which is still under the same ownership, same family's ownership as those who were enslavers of my
Mm.
family.
That's
The
nice.
Lloyd family. Yeah. 11th generation of ownership. I mean, that's how, wealth get passed down.
Yes,
Yes,
That's how wealth
yes.
gets
absolutely.
yeah. Yeah, so, I also visited, White House, which again is not a museum, it's a private home, but I was able to go there and stroll through the house, the grounds, and also the burial ground where the enslaved people, were, laid to rest. And it wasn't until I got to that burial ground that the weight of all the research
Mm.
kinda came down on me. There was a canopy of trees, and I got down on my knees, beneath the trees and began to cry. It was almost as if my ancestors said, "We have been waiting for you."
Mm,
So that's my research. Jeffrey, of course, used my poems as some of his research. We both also had access to some family genealogical research that a cousin had done, and and really locating that cousin who had done the genealogical research freed me up to not have to connect as many dots and to actually tell the stories of my ancestors and their contemporaries. But Jeffrey used picture references from places like the Library of Congress, probably the Maryland State Archives, and also image services like I'm not sure if he used Getty or which ones he used, but he generally uses many different sources for his picture research.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a very moving story, even in terms of the process of discovering those stories and connecting with your ancestry.
Yeah, and that story comes across in the book too. So it's not just a story about the ancestors, but it's a story of our discovery
Yeah.
and our trip to Africa that came like right before we did the research. And you really, and the book ends on, we're still yearning to know where we came from in Africa. We never really were able to find that out, even though we were able to trace our ancestors back to 1770. But, you hit a brick wall. Most Black families hit a brick wall at some point in their genealogical research. And we were very fortunate that the brick wall uh, was not 1870. That's the brick wall that most Black families hit And we were able to trace our family's lineage back 100 years prior to that, to colonial America.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you've gotten quite a bit of recognition from libraries and librarians for your books. And we're living in a time where history, whose history, how it's told, et cetera, has become a bone of contention sometimes. And you have parents who challenge what stories are appropriate for children and youth to learn about. What's your response to those who would either limit or ban books from libraries and school curriculum that tell stories about addressing some of the more difficult parts of American history, particularly around the stories of injustice and justice movements?
Right. So I'm going to start with an African proverb. Until the lion tells his story,
Mm.
the hunter will always be the hero. We have been the lions. African Americans we have been the lions. And those who want to be canonized in history have been the hunters. And our story has either been twisted or left out, omitted from American history. So now is the time that we must tell our own stories. We have the power to do that. We've been empowered by our ancestors and by education to be able to do that. And I say to parents who participate in book bans or advocate book bans, children are not too tender for tough topics. And it's never too early to raise an anti-racist. And the books that I write and that others like me write about African American history are meant to spark conversations. We don't just write these books so that African American children can see themselves, but we write them so other children can see us as well, can see beyond themselves and cultivate empathy. So our books are not just important from a cultural and historical standpoint, but from a social emotional standpoint, in terms of creating the empathy that we need to live as we should as human beings on this earth with the rest of civilization.
Yeah. You know, what you just said reminded me of I heard a minister who had a congregation in a very small rural community, very homogeneous, talk about teaching the congregation to sing songs out of other traditions to remind them that there was a world beyond the one that they lived in that
Mm.
existed.
Yeah,
And so when you said that, that reminds me of a point that minister was trying to make of creating empathy by understanding you're not the center of the universe, that we
right.
share this world with many other people.
Exactly. It's very important for children to know because the world is getting smaller and smaller.
Carol, Taquina and I, for this podcast, our fifth season, decided we were going to spotlight U.S. history for the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. And we call the series Revolution to Rights America at 250. And we've created a bookshelf on our affiliate bookstore page that includes some of your books because we want this to be a multi-generational experience. And of course, Kin, which you just talked about, the story of your family is part of that bookshelf. Also, Troubled Waters about the 1965 Selma to Montgomery Voting Rights March, which we did a podcast about the film Selma, directed by Ava DuVernay. And we had the Reverend Dr. Gordon D. Gibson, who was actually there in Selma
Right.
in 1965. And we also included Box Brown, which is about Henry Box Brown, who escaped from his enslavement because it was the inspiration for our podcast guest, Anthony Cohen, in our conversation about the film Harriet. And Anthony's experience relates to that story because he recreated Box Brown's experience when he took his own Underground Railroad walk from Maryland to Canada. And, yeah, he recreated it for Oprah Winfrey too, when he, was getting her ready to take on her role in the film Beloved.
Oh,
So
wow.
so tell us, what would you add to this library to bring this story of the 250-year history of freedom movements to life for young readers?
Well, I've added my book, Black Hands, The Builders of Our Nation, and it's a book that focuses on African American contributions to this nation that began before the revolution and that continue to this day. So I'll just read, and let me just read a little snippet from it.
Oh,
Black
good.
hands point the way for more to follow. Black hands uplift the young who own tomorrow. Black hands hold strong through the struggle, prodding this land to live up to its promise, liberty and justice for all. So of course, I wrote this book with the 250th anniversary in mind, and it's illustrated by one of my frequent collaborators, Gregory Christie.
Well, Carole, I think you've kind of answered a couple of questions that we had for you. One about why is it important to keep history alive and relevant? But is there more you'd like to say on that point about why history matters?
Well, it matters because history it's our only roadmap that documents, how we got from where we were to where we are. And our future must be informed by our past. Otherwise we're just starting over, every year, every day. History is always with us. We definitely have tomorrow, but we also have the past, and we all can contribute to it. We all can make our mark on history, and we're all a part of history, whether we realize it or not.
Well, thank you, Carole, for joining us on Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters. And thank you for writing all these books for young readers. I think our
And
listeners.
as adult readers.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes I have to pick up a young reader book to get the story when I need it fast and when I need it explained to me in a way that I can understand and appreciate it, and also take it that step further.
And I will say, I also purchase children's books because I love them. And I even have a copy of The Beatitudes from Slavery to Civil Rights sitting next to me now, which is one of your books that I bought quite a while ago.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, well, I've come to realize that my books often do double duty, educating and enlightening not only the intended audience of children, but also adults who were deprived of this knowledge when we were in school, and our parents didn't even know a lot of these things because our history, as I said, has been left out of the textbooks in large part. So I view it as important work, and I thank you for spotlighting it today.
Kin, Rooted in Hope is one of our From Page to Screen books for Season 5 of Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters. Go to our affiliate bookstore. You'll find the link on our webpage at michonnebostongroup.com/Boston Sisters. Look for the From Page to Screen, Revolution to Rights, and General Historical Drama bookshelves. Also, check your local library to find more books by Carole Boston Weatherford, in addition to these From Page to Screen picks for Season 5 of Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters.
From our Revolution to Rights America at 250 bookshelf, Divided We Stand, The Battle Over Women's Rights and Family Values That Polarized American Politics by Marjorie J. Sproul, published by Bloomsbury Publishing.
John Adams by David McCullough, published by Simon & Schuster.
A Great Improvisation, Franklin, France, and the Birth of America by Stacy Shipp, published by Henry Holt and Company.
The Book of Negroes by Lawrence Hill, published by HarperCollins.
And for the Regency era and Alexander Dumas fans, The Annotated Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen, annotated and edited by David M. Shepard, published by Anchor Books.
Queen of Exiles by Vanessa Riley, published by William Morrow.
The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas.
And The Black Count by Tom Rees, published by Crown Publishers. Taquina and I talk about these book picks in a bonus video episode. Subscribe to Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters so you won't miss our upcoming Revolution to Rights podcast, spotlighting the series John Adams, Franklin, and the Book of Negroes, inspired by 3 of our From Page to Screen book picks. Thank you for catching this episode of Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters. We hope you enjoyed our exploration of captivating historical films and series dramas. Find us on Instagram at Historical Drama Sisters and on Facebook at Historical Drama Boston Sisters.
We want to hear from you. What historical dramas are you watching? Share your favorites. We may feature them in a future episode. Don't forget to subscribe. Visit our website at michonnebostongroup.com/Boston Sisters and share the podcast with fellow historical drama enthusiasts.
Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters is brought to you by the Michonne Boston Group. The views and opinions expressed on Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters are those of the speakers and do not represent the positions or views of the Michonne Boston Group, its clients, or affiliates. This is Michonne Boston.
And this is Tequina Boston.
Thank you for listening.